From Chicago's CAN TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Hi, welcome to the show. I'm Ken Davis, and if you had taken a bet with reporters and members of the, professional observer class about this time last week, most of them, I'm sure, would have confidently told you the teachers are not going to strike. It's not going to happen. They'll walk it right up to midnight, and then David Vitale and Carolyn Lewis will come out and they'll appear and they'll be very serious looking, and they'll announce that there's been a last-minute resolution. That's what everybody thought. But as we all stood in that media mob on Sunday night and watched Vitale emerge from the merchandise mart, that's when it began to dawn on us all that it was going to be a little bit different. So we're 4 strike days into the teacher strike, and there is word that today, Thursday, might be the day it all gets settled. Teacher evaluations and teacher retention. That's what it's all about. That's what it's come down to. Those are both huge, complex, nationally based issues, and how they get settled in this historically union town is going to be the big deal around the country. It's looking at what happens in Chicago, which is historically the home, of course, to unions and a Democratic president. So there's going to be a lot of impact on it. Small and large venues are all going to be kind of figuring out what it means to them. But along the way, the CTU got to use up some of its intense media time to call attention to the deplorable conditions in so many of our public schools. Air conditioning, up-to-date communications technologies, libraries, things like that. They matter if we're serious about building an equitable, effective system for all of our students. And those things weren't being discussed at the bargaining table, as we know, but for once they got some time at the TV anchor desk, and that's probably a good thing for everybody. Journalist Dan Weissman is joining us today from Columbia College. He's been covering schools and education policy for quite a while. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you with us. And also Rebecca Harris from Catalyst Chicago is joining us. And Rebecca, I know you've probably, like everybody else, been putting in some very long days, going to a lot of press conferences over the last 72 hours or whatever it's been. As we sit here on Thursday morning, there's optimism abroad in the newspapers. I'm seeing the Chicago Sun-Times, the Venerable Sun-Times, saying Rahm gives a little, which they later changed that headline to strike might end Friday or something like that. Anyway, what's happening?
What's happening is that we heard that as of late last night, when negotiations had ended for the evening.
This would be Wednesday night?
Wednesday night. Both sides were optimistic that there might be a deal coming. We have now heard this morning that the Chicago Teachers Union has scheduled tentatively a House of Delegates meeting for tomorrow, Friday, around 2. So if all goes according to plan, it's looking like potentially, if there is a deal today, the House of Delegates could take it up tomorrow, and school could be back in session on Monday. But of course, as we all know, there's a lot that could happen by
Anything
tomorrow.
could happen, right. But when you've been observing this for a while, that's always the thing to look at, is the House of Delegates. When they have the House of Delegates standing by, you know that means there could be a vote or something. But of course that means, I've been hearing this all this morning, that there could be school on Friday, and it seems to me that just the logistics aren't there. I mean, even if they, well, maybe if they settle this very early today, Thursday, they could maybe pull it off. But it's most likely, don't you think, that just for logistical reasons, they'll just call it a lost week, and start on Monday, even if they have a deal?
Potentially. We do know that they've said they could call the House of Delegates together within a couple hours' notice. So, if something happens and they work it all out early today, it could happen that there could be school tomorrow. But based on everything we're seeing and how many issues remain to be resolved, my guess is this is going to go on into tomorrow.
It's been really fascinating to watch. We've remarked on it many times on this show that the House of Delegates is 800 teachers, and they can pull it together in minutes, and it votes unanimously. I just can't believe it, which of course is really what I want to talk about today, and that's kind of the where we've come, the journey we've come to arrive at this point here today, where what was, I think you could fairly say, a moribund teachers union a few years ago has now suddenly become this sort of national beacon of organizing, and you're seeing, you know, people from all over the country, a lot of national TV shows and radio shows all sort of wanting to know, how did this happen in Chicago? So we'll see if we can figure any of that out. Dan, you, among many things you've done, you for some period of time hosted the call-in show with J.C. Brizard that was on public radio on WBEC. And so you have a kind of an interesting perspective because you, I presume, got to know the CEO pretty well. What's going on with him? Why are we not seeing him prominently being played out here?
Well, so I spent a little time with him. We didn't exchange cell phone numbers, so I haven't been in close touch with him about it. So I didn't really give I can only speculate. But my impression from spending that time with him was, and especially as time went on, super nice guy, very personable, very charming, very smart, full of ideas, and it didn't seem like these kind of biggest decisions about how are we going to negotiate with the teachers union? What's going to, when there are big things that are going to be politically difficult, I think that he knew that wasn't going to be his call. That wasn't even when he was hired. He was not. It certainly appeared that, I met him a few months into his tenure, and it certainly seemed to me as I spent time with him that he had lots of ideas, lots of things he wanted to do that seemed to mostly be, for these purposes, kind of around the margins. That these questions of are we going to lengthen the school day? This seems like a mayoral decision. He got to be a spokesperson for it. Are we going to play hardball with the teachers union? This was, again, he had a limited role in that stuff. Right.
Well, of course, John Cass and others have said that his real job is just to be sort of a human shield, that if it goes badly, he gets fired. At some level, these guys, like McCarthy, they're brought in, their main job is to be fired when things go badly. It's kind of a cynical view, but there is something to that. So, all right, let's try to figure out where we're at here. As we understand it, we're down to these two kind of buckets of problems, teacher evaluations and teacher retention, I guess would be a way of putting it, right? How teachers get to keep their jobs. We can take them in any order, but how about the retention thing? Why is that so big with the teachers? Why are they so concerned about teachers who get fired having first dibs or sort of right of first, help me figure that out.
It's a particularly big deal right now because with millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars of budget deficits coming down the line for CPS, there could be massive amounts of school closings. We keep hearing rumblings, nothing official yet, that the district may be closing up to 100, even 120 schools in the coming years. Big. Which would be huge. Yeah. It would be a very large number of teachers that could be laid off in that. And so the union naturally wants to make sure its members have job protections. The other thing the union wants is it actually wants a 2-year contract rather than the 4-year contract CPS is proposing.
Is that still being debated? I thought that was settled. Oh, okay.
That is my understanding.
Wow.
And possibly one reason for that is so that the union could then take a stronger stance against whatever school closings may be coming down the line.
That would really make sense from their perspective. You could see how that would be. I thought it was interesting that David Vitale yesterday, for the first time, did actually use a number. It wasn't the number of school closings. What did he say? 130,000 extra seats or something? That they're as population has declined, there are many schools that are deeply under-enrolled, and there are, there's over 100,000 empty, as they call them, seats in the system. So how do you deal with that? Well, you close some schools, you consolidate schools, you radically redesign the number of schools that you're deploying, and every time you close a building, I guess you save some. I assume you save some money.
I'm going back and forth because this is an issue that I remember looking at when I worked at Catalyst back in the day, and the question of kind of how much money you save closing a school was it was surprising how little money you ended up with at the end of the day. And my memory isn't good enough to remember all the reasons why, but one other thing that I would speculate on today is that, well, gosh, if you were going to close a building as a CPS site, the tradition that they've been employing is you're going to continue to operate that building as a site that's run by someone who's running a charter network or that's contracting to you. So you're not, you're still operating that building. It's still there.
So, I mean, what you're saying is very often these buildings don't just get mothballed or sold off for condos or something. They still have to run the building.
Well, right, and part of it is that it's a property that's hard to kind of repurpose right away.
Right,
you don't have a ready buyer
right.
for a building on the west side.
Right. I'm joking about the condo development, but yeah.
Well, but then you still, you got to keep the heat on and keep the pipes from bursting.
Yeah.
And somebody's got to do that and come out
and when the windows get broken, you still got to fix them or whatever. But the big thing, I guess, is personnel, because you can save a lot of money by firing 60 or 70 teachers if that's what you do. But of course, the union is saying, hell no, you're going to keep us or something. Do either of you have any understanding, and believe me, I don't myself, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, do you have any understanding about exactly what it is how the CTU wants that procedure to work? I mean, there's been a very interesting. I am always fascinated by the by the spin and the phrases that get developed, and the phrase that the mayor and everybody has been using is "let the principal have the decision about blah 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 blah." Well, a couple things about that. First of all, I don't think anybody ever thought the principal wouldn't have the final say in this. Maybe I'm wrong. And the other thing is that it's so interesting to see how far we've come in 20 years, because 20 years ago it was let the local school council have but I guess we don't use the term LSC anymore. That's yesterday, right? The whole thing about having school councils have their say about this stuff. But seriously, how do the two sides see this process happen? Let's say that you have 30 people fired at a school. Should they have direct right to then get a job at another school, or should they get to be in line first to be interviewed for that job? I don't get that part.
Well, what CPS is currently offering is a procedure that would allow teachers first dibs at interviews, and in some cases limited recall rights, but it would only be available for teachers with proficient or better ratings, which the district estimates, and of course the union disputes that this would actually be applied to this many teachers, but CPS estimates that would apply to about the top 70% or so of teachers. What CTU is looking for is something a little bit more like the interim agreement that it reached with CPS during the summer that would guarantee that, say, if a certain number of displaced CTU teachers applied for a position, a principal would have to choose one of those as long as the teachers were qualified.
So there would be some mandatory part of this that some teachers would have to be hired.
We're not clear on the details,
Right.
but that is my understanding, is that CTU is looking for something with a little bit more teeth to it, where if there's a certain number of applicants, CPS would need to choose
because
one.
Correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the CPS side seems to be very clearly at least inferring, if they're not outright saying, that the CTU wants teachers to just be able to slide into jobs as they open up, and that's not exactly the way that is obviously something that they're probably still arguing about while we're sitting here right now.
And we haven't seen the CTU's offer, so we don't know, what they'd be willing to accept.
Right. And we did see the 19-page document that the CPS put out this morning, and I kind of slogged through it about 6:30 this morning, and I have to say I came out not really understanding it any better. I mean, one thing that they're trying to do is that they want to create this what is it? There's like a pool of exceptional teachers or something. This would be something new, that you'd get into this pool, and then you would have some kind of bumping rights. So of course the thought that occurs to me is then everybody's going to be, this is going to be like Garrison Keillor, right? Everybody's going to be above average. Everybody's going to be an exceptional teacher. So.
And actually that's one of the things they're arguing over, which is that CTU would like the CPS to change the cut scores for what qualifies as a proficient teacher, what qualifies as an excellent teacher.
Because right now, almost everybody's rated very highly, right?
And the district is trying to change that,
Right,
but then CTU would like that to be a little bit more expansive.
Something that I'm sure most people would say makes a lot of sense. If you have 30,000 people, they're not all proficient. Some of them are.
They could all be proficient. They may not all be. I mean, right? Any number of people can be proficient.
Right.
But they can't all be above average for that group.
They can't all be good teachers, I guess is what we want to say.
They could.
Yeah.
There's no reason why not.
All
Yeah.
of them could be good teachers?
There's
Did you go to the Chicago Public Schools? Because I did, and I got to tell you, I knew some teachers a few years back who were not good teachers, but that's beside the point.
Under CPS's current proposal, the district is estimating that the bottom 1.5% of teachers would be rated as unsatisfactory. Another 28% would be rated as developing or needs improvement. So that's one thing the union is taking issue with, is that they think the union thinks the second lowest category should be made smaller, so more teachers are proficient.
So they actually want to specify the size of these categories.
Well, it's just an estimate. It's a CPS estimate of how many teachers would be in each category, and of course CTU actually disputes it and thinks the district is estimating wrong.
So the district is saying, we want to say 28% of our teachers are kind of like mediocre. It's kind of what they're saying. Well, that's very interesting. Now, of course, hand in glove with this is the second thing, which is this thing about how you evaluate teachers, because that's how you get in that pool, right, is one way or the other, depending on how you evaluate. So Dan, you work at a college, so you're a very smart guy.
I'm not sure if that applies, but okay.
I got to tell you, this is one of these things where I have lots of friends, and I think we have more opinions about this than there are friends in the pool. How do you evaluate a teacher? What criteria do you use? What inputs do you use? And obviously, that's what they're fighting about now. And this is an incredibly important fight that's being had right here, because what these guys decide, I have a feeling, might influence a lot of other districts down the line. So what? Talk about this. What are they talking about right now, and does it make sense?
Well, this is kind of a question back to you, actually. To hear the union describe kind of what they're opposed to is like, well, we think standardized test scores are an inappropriate measure. When the mayor and Jean-Claude Brizard, this is one of the issues that he does speak about, give their side, I think they sound very reasonable. And they say, well, this is a big process, we've collaborated a lot, and test scores are not even the majority of kind of what gets considered here. Where are we in the middle of that? I mean, it sounds very reasonable to say,
it does.
if we're going to have a holistic process, this could be one factor we consider. But is that a distortion in some way of what they're really proposing?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues is that the state has actually mandated these new teacher evaluations. The state has mandated that eventually at least 30% of a teacher's...
This is part of House Bill 7, right?
This is actually part of the Performance Evaluation Reform Act of 2010. It's a bill that was passed to make Illinois more competitive and race to the top, which of course we didn't even get that money.
Right.
But the state has mandated at least 30% of a teacher's evaluation be tied to student performance. CPS had originally said they wanted to make that up to around 40%. Now they're saying they want to make it up to eventually phase in to be around 35%. But there's still this push and pull with the union, whereas CTU would like the district only to factor in the amount mandated by state law and not anymore.
Okay, I think I followed that. But yeah, I mean, what we're saying is that they're arguing over how much test results from the classroom should determine how a teacher is rated. But is it, one of the things that I've heard the teachers pushing back on, and again, this gets very confusing, is people saying, okay, I work in a school, the famed Diet High School might be a good example, okay? I work in a school where virtually everybody is from an impoverished community. The whole world is stacked against these poor kids who are in this school. And I heard this actually at a public hearing not too long ago about diet, teachers standing up and saying, but guess what? My kids in my class, even in this school, did advance 1 year in the last year. Now, of course, that didn't mean that they meet state standards by any means, but I did my job as a teacher. I moved them one period. Does that count the same as somebody who's at Lincoln Park High School or someplace where these things happen almost, well, with greater ease, let's put it that way?
The district is supposed to be, in its statistical measures, factoring in for where students start and for comparing schools with similar amounts of students in poverty to each other, so that that playing field is leveled a little bit more for the teachers. But of course, the teachers, not having seen how this works before, are skeptical about how that will actually play out.
Right.
Are there, right, because this is something that statisticians have been working on for decades, right? Like, well, gosh, how do you kind of discount for all these other factors that everyone, in a kind of common sense way, can see, like, yeah, that would make a difference in how you did your job. And is the union making proposals of how to kind of design those measures?
I'm not sure that the union has. They have proposed on the performance tasks, which in addition to standardized tests are another rating. There's going to be these teacher-designed, sort of more open-ended tests that students take. And the union has proposed basically that they want students to be moving one level on a 4-point scale on these tests each year. But as far as the actual statistical models, we haven't seen the union do that. I mean, and that speaks to part of the bigger issue with these, which is that these statistical models are kind of black boxes, and a lot of people just don't understand how they work, and that leads to a lot of, I think, fear and skepticism about how they'll actually pan out.
And it's just one of those things that, as far as I can tell, nobody's really come up with the right answer for this yet. Everybody agrees, I think, that there has to be some kind of an effective tool for evaluating the performance of a teacher, because if you don't have it, you get into the situation where 99% of your teachers are excellent, and that's just not that. If you don't have some kind of objective rating system, then you can't weed out or improve the teachers who need to have that happen to them. Do you think that this is just a personal observation, but I was talking to some people from the union on Sunday night before the announcement was made that there was going to be a strike, and a couple of people opined to me that things had reached such a white-hot level that the loggerheads between the mayor and Karen Lewis, that Karen Lewis needed to take them out for a couple of days, because they had to get out there and hold their picket signs up and all that. Do you think that's?
I can't speak to that, but I can. I mean, you've probably seen this too, or I'm curious about what your impressions are. That talking to teachers who are out, it appears to me that there are the issues that we've been talking about, and they are important issues. Right. And as you mentioned at the top of the show, there are all these other issues that this is an opportunity to talk about, and that
an opportunity that they've seized.
Right, and that they, one teacher I talked to yesterday said, "Look, I can't be fired for what I say while we're out on strike." That this is in some ways an opportunity to take this platform and talk about what the jobs they want to do, that they're trying to do, all the things they're doing. Teachers are saying to me, "Look, it's 115 degrees in my classroom.
Right.
I proposed to buy AC units myself," and they said, "Great, we'll also send you the electric bill."
That's horrible.
It is. It is. Regardless of how would you even calculate
But don't worry,
that?
this old building doesn't have the wiring to support your air conditioner anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But there's such a long list of grievances that teachers have that involve management decisions that are can be variously kind of interpreted as arbitrary, misguided, or malicious, or incompetent, and they have so few opportunities to kind of protest that whole menu of things. And so, the energy that I've seen on teacher picket lines and in talking to teachers, I have to say I find quite moving.
It's been so fascinating to me I live out northwest, and when almost anywhere I go, you'll see at major intersections, you'll just see gaggles of red-shirted people and people driving by the intersection just honking at them, and they're not, and it's respectful honking. So there's something going on here, and I really do believe that there was a sort of a sense that we know we can't bargain about air conditioning at the bargaining table, right? But we sure as heck can get out there in public and list these things. We can talk about the longer school day that we weren't going to be paid for. We can talk about the 4% that you took away from us. We can talk about all these conditions in the classroom.
Those are not things that teachers are talking about when they're out on the line.
Right, but right now what we want to talk about is respect. We want to talk about the way that we have just been sort of assaulted over the last year and a half.
over a longer period than that.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
This goes back years. This goes back to Mayor
Of
Daley's
course it
Renaissance
does.
2010
Absolutely
school
it does,
closings.
right.
Adding
I
charter
was
schools.
thinking, as I was saying that, I was thinking about the grievances that they have with Mayor Emanuel, but obviously this goes back way back, and just because there was so-called labor peace where the financial piece got dealt with all the time doesn't necessarily mean that any of these other systemic issues were being dealt with, and now it's all boiling over. So what does this mean for future President Rahm Emanuel? Does this affect his campaign for president at all?
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, my take is that they'll most
We
likely
kid the mayor. Yeah, as
come
Bill.
out with a deal sometime in the next couple days. That's what I expect. That both sides will be able to spin as a win, and it most likely won't have a negative impact on him.
I think that we've seen a couple of things that I have found really fascinating and would not have imagined would be true. But the kind of the whole sort of Rahm Emanuel, David Axelrod, Barack Obama thing of the way you win the public is you carpet bomb them with television ads and radio ads. They tried that and it didn't work on this one. This is one of those times when it kind of didn't work with the advertising campaign that they used. Tell the teachers to settle, that kind of thing. Anyway, the real issue seems to be that we just have this whole sort of this political stew that's going on here, and it's really hard to kind of sort out who's winning and who's losing. But it's been interesting to watch Rahm Emanuel when he has been taken to the wire every single time. When he gets about 70% of what he wants, he folds his tent and walks away. That seems to be his method. No?
I haven't been measuring, but it seems
Okay,
reasonable.
maybe
It
it's
seems like,
80.
and it seems like a great strategy.
Yeah.
I would do that
yeah.
if I had
Yeah.
my wits about me.
Right. And so that may be what we're seeing here today when we see headlines that say Rahm gives a little, because there sure hasn't been the perception that he's giving any. And when I hear, as I did on the way down today, John Cass on the venerable WLS radio talking about how he's caving, he's giving in, he's giving these teachers everything they want, and I read the venerable editorial in the Chicago Tribune saying, "Don't cave, Mr. Mayor," then I'm thinking that maybe they're getting scared that that's exactly what he's doing. Okay. All right. I think we're just about out of time, right? We've got about a minute to go. Just a quick thing that I want to mention. We didn't get a chance to talk about this today, but your colleague Sarah Karp wrote a terrific piece in Catalyst about central office staffing, and I think it's worth reading. Also, Carol Marine did a good piece in the Chicago Sun-Times, too. Lots of other things. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you'll come back again. Rebecca, thank you for joining us. Hope you'll come back again. This is Chicago Newsroom. That's what you've been watching. It's a community service of CAN TV, and I'm Ken Davis saying thanks. You can find us here on cable, but you can also you can see it anytime you want right here at this address. Just check us out anytime you like. So thank you very much, and we will see you next week with another edition of Chicago Newsroom right here on CAN TV. Till then.